Hi everyone, my name is Ellie Mae and I'm here today to show you a little bit about the Artesprix Sublimation products. In the last few years, Artesprix has released several different products that you can utilize to create sublimation projects without having a sublimation printer. What is sublimation? Sublimation is simply, it is an ink transfer. In this case, we're using the Artesprix Sublimation markers, stamp pads, or paints on copy paper, just ordinary copy paper. And with that process, adding heat and pressure, that ink is going to transfer to our sublimation blanks. Now you do need specialized blanks. The sublimation ink transfers and binds to specific coded blanks. So you can check out the links in the description below for all of the supplies that I'm going to be using in this projects today, as well as more information on Artesprix Sublimation. So let's take a look. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can use these keychains, and we're going to do a quick project where I'm going to show you how you can do this with any of these products. So no matter what you have in your stash, you could do the same technique with all of them. So let's go ahead and change cameras and we'll get started. Okay, so for the first demonstration, I am going to utilize the sublimation markers. These are the 3 different sets that Artesprix currently has. Check on their website for the most current products. The links are in the description below. And I'm going to be using the metal keychains blank. So let me go through the supplies real quick first. So the sublimation markers, when you're using the sublimation markers, you want to store them flat, but when you go to use them, set them up so they're upright and with the tip pointed down for about 5 minutes, so you get that ink flowing. But you should always store your markers flat for their preservation. And then I'm going to be using the metal keychains blanks, or they have 3 different types. So I have a hardboard here, I have a maple colored hardboard here, and then I have the metal keychains. So they have a couple different types. I've already done up some examples, and when I was testing this, you can see that there is color differences. So this is the maple, and that's going to kind of show through and show your color. And this is your white substrate. Something to keep in mind is that sublimation ink is transparent. So that is why you have mostly with your sublimation blanks your white surfaces, because colors will affect the final outcome of those colors since the ink is transparent. So we have our blanks. I have my markers that have been sitting for 5 minutes. We're going to also use Artesprix protective paper. This is a siliconized paper that is going to help to protect our surface when we go to press. Very important, and I'll show you how to use that when we get there. And then what we're going to be using is, you just need a pencil. We are going to trace around our blank to get the shape. You want to use a pencil and not pen or permanent marker or anything else that could transfer. Pencil does not transfer when we do the heat process. I also have a little mini mister here that I'm going to use to help create that watercolor effect. And then I just have a plastic bag. You could use some plastic wrap. This is the great size for these keychains. So you can see that it'll fit perfectly on there. So what we're going to do then is you also need just a pair of scissors and your Artesprix heat tape. So with that, I think with the copy paper, regular ordinary copy paper. So we're going to go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to take my blank and I'm going to trace around it. Now, the one thing I want to also mention here is that these are 3 different blanks that I have in front of me. They're all keychains, but you can notice that there are different thicknesses. On the Artesprix website, for each of their blanks, they do have the time and temperature, but in this case, I wouldn't be able to press these at the same time just because of the different thicknesses. So that's something to keep in mind when you go to press them. So I'm going to, you also want to make sure that they're all the same size. So if you're using different blanks, you want to make sure that you're tracing around each of those blanks individually. So in this case, I'm just going to trace around the blank. This gives me a template for me to design within. So I have one here, and it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just trying to get an idea of how much space you have to work with. Anything that you leave blank is going to be the color of the blank. So you want to keep that in mind. So if you don't have any color on this square that we're working with, it's going to be the color of your substrate. So I'm going to do a couple more here because we are going to be doing the inks and the paints. So I'm just going to draw them all at once. And I'll just do another one of these. Now this is such a fun product to play with because sometimes you just don't know what the outcome's going to look like. It's a great way to just let go and see what happens. So now that I have that, I'm going to just take my scissors. I'm going to cut this apart. So then I have a little bit smaller pieces to work with. So these are my templates that I'm going to be working with. And I just need one right now. You want to make sure if you have specific blank sizes that you know which one goes with which. I'll move this out of the way. I am going to add that to it. So on this one, I've already added the stamps. They have a sublimation stamp set as well. The first one we're going to work with is we are going to work with these markers. So I'm just going to take two colors. It is a small space, and what you can do, this is a neat little trick. What you can do is you can actually place this on top so you kind of know where you want to color. Like I said, you want to go outside of your lines of your template. Anything that you leave blank is going to show up as the substrate color. So I'm just going to first take my pink and I'm just going to start coloring. And this is really just have fun, play with it. See what happens. And it is, does kind of dry quickly if you leave it too long. So you don't want to leave it long after the fact. If you get your markers mixed in together, you can just simply scribble off on somewhere else to get rid of that extra color. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, you can kind of see how with this plastic that it's kind of spreading out, it's doing its own thing. That's just fine. No two are going to probably turn out the same. I'm just going to add some water for that watercolor effect. You don't want too much water, but you want enough to give it that effect. So I'm just going to grab a paper towel here, and I have my surface protected with another silicone mat that I purchased. Not an Artesprix product, but just make sure to protect your work surface. You don't want to get ink anywhere else. If you do, you want to clean it up as soon as possible. And you can see that it kind of moves around. If you get to a lot of water there, that's okay. We're kind of going for that watercolor effect. Just be careful when you flip this over. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip it, and I'm going to press that down and kind of smoosh it. As I do, that ink kind of gives it that watercolor. The ink's going to smush around on there, and you create a masterpiece. Sublimation inks are not the true color until they are heated, and then you will see the true color. So in this case, since we are working with water, I would let it dry a little bit before we actually put the blank onto it. So I am going to work with the other products as these dry. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a paper towel, fold it in half, and I'm going to wipe off my plastic wrap. That's good. I can just set that aside. And here is our first one. So we're going to kind of let this dry for a few seconds. Let that dry. I don't want my blank to touch it. You can see I kind of already got an ink transfer there in the beginning. That's okay. It's going to cover it up. I'm not worried about it. What I'm going to do is I am going to, while that's drying, I'm going to clean this mess up, and I'm going to switch over to the next product. Okay, so now I've switched over. I am going to be utilizing the stamp ink pads and the ink refills. So depending on what products you currently have, in this case, we're going to use all the same products. We have our blank with our copy paper. I'm going to also use a paintbrush with a little bit of water that we're going to help with that watercolor effect. And I have my plastic wrap right here. So we already have drawn out our template on our blank. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take these ink pads. We'll use yellow and orange in this case. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to stamp it on top of my plastic bag here. And this is really completely up to you how you do this. I'm kind of a linear person, so of course you can see that I have these using linear stamping. So I have that. Now I have this. So I'm going to take just my paintbrush and just a little bit of water. And I'm just going to, and I probably should have started with the bottom. Start with your lighter colors first. But I just rinsed my brush and I can just kind of blend this all together, however you would like it. If I want to pull some orange down, I can pull it into the yellow. If I want to go back to the yellow, I can rinse my brush off, dry it a little bit, come back into the yellow, make it lighter. We'll see how this works out. Again, just create. So very, very simple. I'm going to take, and you can kind of see that the water moves around a little bit. I'm going to take that over. I'm going to flip it over. First, I'm going to protect my workspace just in case with a paper towel. And then I'm going to take this, lay it down, and I'm just going to smush it around. My orange might have overpowered my yellow in this case. And then when I'm done, I'll move this out of the way. And I can simply take that off, and I have my substrate ready to go, or my copy paper is ready to go. This one's going to go with this blank. Again, this is a maple hardboard, so this color is going to kind of show through on that. We'll see what it looks like with the orange. I'm going to set this one aside, let it dry while we work with another one, and then I'm just going to wipe off my bag here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my little bag, and I have another copy here of my template. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you using these ink refills. So it doesn't take very much at all. So this one I grabbed pink and I grabbed purple, and we'll see how those turn out. So I'm going to just start with the pink. Again, not much at all, and I'm just going to drop one drop onto my surface. Close that up so I don't spill it. And I'll drop one drop over here of the purple. Well, maybe two because I squeezed too hard. Not much. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paintbrush, rinse it from the last time, and just wipe that on a paper towel, get some water, and I'm just going to spread that around. You can see that I can do the same sort of technique as I did. Maybe I grabbed blue. Oh, I grabbed blue. Okay, we have blue and we have pink. I should have looked closer. So now we have this sort of technique. I'm going to flip this over, and you can come at it from an angle. Maybe I'll do it exactly on the diagonal and just smush it around. Might have needed a little bit more water on that one, but it does give it a different look. So really, this is just a matter of personal preference. Have some fun with it. play with some inks. And there is how you would use the re-inkers in order to do the same sort of watercolor effect. A little bit more water probably would have worked better, but we'll see how that turns out. So I'll set that one aside, and then I'm going to clean up this surface, and I'm going to bring out the paints. Okay, so now I've put the other supplies to the side, and we are going to be working here with the Artesprix paints. So very similar to how I did with the ink. I'm just going to take a little bit. You want to shake them up before you use them. And again, a little goes a long way. So I am going to just take a drop here of the blue. Try not to get too much. So this time I did get the right colors, blue, and I'm going to use the yellow. Oops, that was a bit much. But I'm going to show you something else that we can do with this. Now, what I also want to recommend is, so we have blue, yellow, we have black, and we have red. We also have this white acrylic lightning medium for the sublimation paints. And then on the Artesprix website is a color mixing chart that you can print out. So you can create additional colors based off of these colors that the sublimation paints come in. There'll be a link in the description below for that as well. So I've just printed that off. I'm just going to use some basic colors to get started. And with the paints, I did find that they went a long way. So even with the one drop of paint, yellow has a little bit more in there, but with that, I can actually do like a second time stamp, sometimes even a third. So I'll go ahead and show you that as we get going. I'm going to set all of these aside, and we're going to work with this blank as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paintbrush with a little bit of water, and I can just dig that in there. And we're still kind of going for that watercolor effect, so I can use that water in there to lighten it up. If I get too much, I can come in here and just add more water. And this will give you maybe a little bit bolder, depending on how much paint you're using. And I'm going to go ahead and rinse that off. Grab some paper towels, because I did forget those. Paper towels are always handy, especially if you're like me and you can create a mess. Anything with paint. So that's pretty bold. So I can either, I'm going to go ahead and just mix these. So there's going to be a streak of green in the middle here. Mixing paint colors can be fun. So we'll see how that turns out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that little spritzer. So we can do this, and we can add a little bit more water to give that watercolor effect. And it's just a matter of playing around, seeing what you can do, having some fun. If you don't think it's going to turn out, all you've used is a little bit of copy paper and some ink. And I'm just going to press this down here and smush it around. Oh, looks like my blue. Oh, that might give it a pretty interesting marble effect. We'll see how they all press out. So there we have that. Might have some green in there. I'm going to go ahead and wipe this off. And then there's no point in wasting that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do, it's simply copy paper, and instead of just putting that, rinsing it out down the drain, I'm just going to go ahead and take my brush, grab all my yellow, and let's just paint, use it up. You may or may not press it on something. You can decide that down the road. And then grab some blue. Probably not enough blue, but you never know. You might be something that you like, might be something maybe you put on a keychain. Might look, you know, you could simply then add it to your keychain. You don't need to do the water effect. There's so many options that you can do with these Artesprix supplies. Really, the possibilities It's just your imagination. Use your imagination, see what happens with all the different colors, all the different effects. We'll see about pressing this and see what it looks like. I might even be able to get 2 out of here. And what I could do is I could very carefully try to get a small amount of blue. This was not a planned part of the video, just happens to, when you have paint, you might as well add more to it. See what happens. Add a little bit of water, see if I can get some. There we go. Add a little bit of water to this yellow. That's not gonna work. Yellow and blue make green. Get that out of there. See, and I could probably fit 2 keychains in there, so I could do this, see how it turns out. So I'm going to clean this up, and then I'll come back to the next very important step. Okay, so now we have all the different ones that we've created. So here's our sublimation markers. Here we have our sublimation ink pad. It should be yellow and orange. It looks like it's going to turn out to be orange, and we'll see how it looks on that maple hardboard. And then we have our ink refills that we did here, and we have the paints right here. So I'm going to take a look. We're going to put those on the blanks. So our next step in this process, if you wanted to, you could then add a little saying. Artesprix does have a stamp set. When you are working with sublimation, you want to make sure that when you do it, everything that you do is going to be mirrored when you put it onto your sublimation item. So in this case, these stamps are a mirror image. So when I go to stamp this, it's going to look like it's backwards until that sublimation is transferred to the object, and then it will look correct. So what I'm going to do is I'll just show you that real quick here, so you can really customize this however you'd like. These 2 up here already have the saying on it, so I'm just going to take this, going to ink it up, and I can ink it 2 ways. I can stamp it down on there, or I can take the ink pad on top of it. And then I'm just going to keep in mind your blank is sideways, so I can go ahead and I can just do this right here in the middle of this design. So I have that one. I'll go ahead and ink it again. Of course, I get it in on my finger. Make sure to wash your hands. If you get it on your clothes, wash your clothes before you dry them. Heat does set this ink in. So this one, if your blank is going to be this way, how do we want our blank? Let's do it this way. So I'm going to take my paper towel out from under it. This one's still a little bit wet. Go ahead and stamp that down. Then we'll see how those turn out. So then I always do clean my stamps right away. Artesprix does have an all-purpose cleaner that they just came out with. So I just take a little bit of that, spray it on, take a paper towel, and wipe it off. And then I'll take the stamps off and individually dry them off as well. But now we have our blank. So our next important process is we want to ensure that our blank is not going to move. So we're going to place our blank on top of our drawn template shape. And you do have the option here, if you wanted to move it over just a little bit, that's completely up to you. The pencil does not transfer to the blank when you do the heat process. So you do have a little bit of wiggle room there. You don't want to use anything else that could transfer. So I'm simply just going to take a piece of tape and I'm going to secure it to that piece of copy paper. You don't need a whole lot, just enough to keep it in place. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Artesprix siliconized paper, and you want your paper, I'm going to cut this down first a little bit. It doesn't need to be quite as big. So you want to take your paper, and you want your paper to be bigger than your substrate, and bigger than your copy paper, because when sublimation transfers, when the ink gets heated, it turns into a gas, so it's going to go everywhere that is not on that blank. So you want to make sure that your surface is protected. So I'm just going to take a piece of this, cut it off, and this is siliconized paper, so it doesn't get on there. And then what I can do, these blanks are pretty small, so I'm going to create a sublimation sandwich. So I have this sublimation, it's siliconized paper on the bottom. I'm going to have my blank, and then my copy paper is on top, and I'm going to make a sandwich. And I'm just going to fold this over. If your blank is larger, you can just take 2 pieces of the siliconized paper. Since my blank is pretty small, I can just sandwich that in there. So I'm going to go over that one more time. So you have your siliconized paper on the bottom. You have your blank with your copy paper on top. Your copy paper is what is you want next to your heating surface. And then I have my siliconized paper on top of that. So then when this is heated, if any of that ink is going to come out from underneath, it's going to come out on the siliconized paper and not on to your press or your platen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same steps for all of these blanks. I'm going to speed up this video, and then we'll move over to the heat press. Okay, so I have the 4 different ones. This one I'd have to press at a different time since it would be on the back side of one of the blanks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go set my heat press for 400 degrees. You want to check the Artesprix website or wherever you got your sublimation blanks at for the proper time and temperature for your blank. So for a couple of these, it's the 400 degrees for 60 seconds, and then the metal one is for 45 seconds. So we're going to switch over to the heat press. Okay, so now that we have our heat press is heated up to 400 degrees, I'm going to grab my blanks. The biggest thing here is you want to make sure that your siliconized paper is larger than your surface that you are pressing, and you want to have your sublimation sandwich proper in here. So you have your siliconized paper, you have your blank, then you have your copy paper is on top, so it's closest to your surface. If you do not have your copy paper, if you don't have this set up properly, it's not going to transfer properly. So then you have your sublimation sandwich with your final piece of siliconized paper on top of that. With these blanks, these two are the exact same blanks. They are the white hardboard, so they are the same thickness, so I can press both of these at the same time. The other ones I'll have to press separately because they do have different thicknesses, and the metal keychain blank has a 45-second time limit versus these that are 60 seconds. So I'm going to place these into my press, slide this back in here, and I'm going to start the press, and then I'm going to speed this up through the next blanks that we go through. You don't need to wait out the full 60 seconds while this is pressing. So we are going to go into hyperspeed. Now, once it is pressed, those blanks are going to be extremely hot. So be very, very careful in handling. I'm going to grab my Artesprix protective mat. This is the small version. I loved it so much that I had to then purchase the larger version as well. It's all linked in the description below. I'm going to slide my press out a little ways, and I'm just going to slide these off, and then I am going to press the other two in hyperspeed. Now let's take these back over to our table and let them cool a little bit before we do our unveiling. Okay, so I brought this in with my smaller protective mat from Artesprix. This is my larger one, so I'm just going to transfer these over here. I really like this protective mat. It's heat safe up to the 400 degrees, so I can set anything that's hot, and it protects my workspace. So this is really great. This one's going to be the hottest because it was the last one that I did. So I'm going to start down here with the cooler one. So you want to be very careful. You can use heat safe gloves, but let's take a look at the reveal here. So I can see, it's always cool to do a little peek test. So I have this. I'm just going to take off my heat tape. And there is our watercolor effect. That one's pretty neat. And here is why this siliconized paper is so important. So this is the ink that transferred outside of that copy paper. You do not want this to transfer onto your press platen or the top of your press, because that ink could then transfer to the next object that you pressed. So it's very important to use the protective paper when you're doing sublimation. So this one, so far, that's my favorite. Let's see how this one turned out. So that's pretty cool. That was a neat effect, even though we didn't have quite as much water. Kind of shows the blank through that. We'll get this off. So very neat. And all of them are going to be different. This one's going to be that hardboard, the maple hardboard. So we'll take a peek at that. And it changed it to a pretty orange color. Probably should have stamped on that one, but I could draw a flower. You could use those sublimation markers. You could hand draw flowers. It's a really neat color. Again, I wasn't sure how that one would turn out. This one is going to be probably still pretty, it's pretty okay. It is the metal, and there we have that. Look at that. All the color blending. This one is the paints. So we used yellow and blue, and it made green in the center where it all mixed together with that water. So you have really some very interesting, this one had more water here on the paper, so it kind of smushed around a little bit more. This one didn't have quite as much water. It was a little bit more spread around ink-wise. This one is the re-inkers, so it really just is really dependent on what you're doing with it. Have fun, play with this, and I'm going to switch over to the other camera angle. So that was just a quick project that you can complete with any of the Artesprix sublimation products that they have out. Whether you are using the sublimation markers, the ink pads, the ink refills, or the sublimation paints, there are endless possibilities on what you could do. Be creative, just start playing, start mixing colors, seeing what can happen. It's so fun to just let go and see what you can create with it. Check out the links in the description below for further information. Make sure to follow and like and subscribe to the Artesprix content. Follow on the blog for lots of creative ideas and different blanks. Follow the YouTube channel for more content, lives on the Facebook group, and the Artesprix Inspiration group. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day, and we'll catch you later.